Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling one of the biggest myths out there about wealth. And what we've dug up in our sources is, well, it's not just surprising, it's powerful, but maybe also a little bit predictable.
Predictable in a good way, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe predictable is the wrong word. Predictable once you see the pattern. You see, most people, they kind of assume the top 1% got rich just by earning these, mind-boggling salaries, millions every year.
That's the story we always hear, right? The flashy headlines.
Exactly. But the truth, based on this deep dive we did, it's way more subtle and honestly, far more accessible than you might think. The core idea, the thing that kept popping up, is they didn't get rich just from earning millions. It was about managing the money they did have, way better than pretty much everyone else, 99% of people. Okay, so let's unpack this. Our mission today. Break down the actual data, the strategies, the sort of mundane habits even that let the top 1% in America build real lasting wealth, often without those huge incomes we picture.
And I think what's really crucial here for you listening is understanding not just what they do, but why. Why these simple, consistent habits work so well, why they create that, financial separation.
Yeah.
It really shifts things, doesn't it? From just wishing for more money
Right.
to actually taking control of what you've got, which is, well, pretty empowering.
That's a really important distinction. It totally reframes how you think about building wealth. So let's get into some numbers first because they are pretty striking. Okay,
Yeah.
so the data shows as of 2024, the average net worth for the top 1% in the U.S., it's over $13 million.
13 million, wow.
Yeah. Now compare that to the median U.S. household net worth. That's hovering around $192,000.
So you're looking at, what, a 68 to 1 difference? That's huge.
Staggering, right. 68 times. And when you see a number like that, it's easy to think, okay, well, they must have inherited.
Or won the lottery, yeah. The usual assumptions.
Exactly. But here's the twist, the big sort of revelation from digging into this. The vast majority of these high net worth folks, they didn't inherit it. They didn't hit some jackpot.
And what's so fascinating about that, I think, is how it just flips the script immediately.
Right.
It takes the focus off, external stuff, things you can't control, like luck or who your parents were.
Yeah, totally out of your hands.
And puts it squarely onto internal things, like your behavior, your habits, choices, things that are absolutely 100% within your own influence. And that's why this insight is just so powerful for anyone wanting to build wealth.
Absolutely. And this next bit of data, it really, really drives that point home. Honestly, when I first saw this, I had to kind of stop and reread it.
Okay.
Get this. Research from sources like Ramsey Solutions, Fidelity 2, they found that over half of American millionaires have never earned six figures in a single year.
Wow, over half.
Over half. Let that sink in.
The majority.
Right. Made less than $100,000 a year for their whole careers, potentially.
So they weren't pulling down these massive salaries, we imagine.
Nope. So the big question then is, what did they do? How did they get there? That's really the core of it, isn't it?
Yeah, and if you connect that to the sort of the bigger picture, the answer becomes surprisingly clear.
Oh.
They really mastered living below their means. That's number
Yeah.
one. They invested consistently. And a key takeaway from the material we looked at, they budgeted like financial pros with real precision.
Budgeted like pros.
And that really challenges the conventional wisdom. It suggests wealth is maybe less about how big your paycheck is
Right.
and much more about the discipline you have in managing it.
Okay, so if budgeting like a professional is the secret sauce, what does that actually look like? What's the practical application?
Well, one of the most effective strategies that kept coming up in the sources, something widely used by the wealthy apparently, is the 50-30-20 budgeting rule.
Ah, yes, 50-30-20.
Oh,
Heard
sorry.
of that. Sounds simple, maybe deceptively simple.
It kind of is. It's wonderfully straightforward. Here's the basic breakdown. 50% of your after-tax income, that goes to essential needs.
Okay, needs. Like housing, utilities, groceries, getting to work, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Then 30% is earmarked for discretionary spending, your wants.
Right, so dining out, movies, shopping, hobbies, the fun stuff.
And finally, crucially, a solid 20%. That goes straight into savings or investments or maybe paying down debt aggressively.
20% for the future, basically.
You got it. It's a very clear system for giving every single dollar a specific job.
Okay, but why does that simple formula matter so much? What's the deep impact?
Well, the thing is, it forces balance, Right. It's like a built-in governor against lifestyle creep.
Ah, lifestyle creep. Yeah, where you start earning more, so you just spend more.
And save nothing extra.
Exactly. It just sort of vanishes. This formula helps prevent that. And maybe most critically, it guarantees that a chunk of every dollar you earn is actively working to build your future.
So it's less about restriction and more about designing your spending.
That's a great way to put it. Consciously designing your spending patterns, not just letting them happen. That sounds, well, incredibly disciplined, almost rigid, maybe?
Right.
Do the sources say you have to follow it exactly, like 50.0%, 30.0%? Is there wiggle room?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Look, while 50-30-20 is a super powerful guideline, it's not meant to be some kind of financial straitjacket.
Okay.
The sources really emphasize it's a framework. It's the spirit of the rule that counts. Prioritizing your needs, being really mindful about wants, and crucially, dedicating a significant slice, that 20% or maybe even more, to your future wealth.
So the principle matters more than the exact percentage.
Exactly. Some people might tweak it, maybe 60-20-20 if housing costs are high, or maybe 40-30-30 if they're really aggressive savers. But that core idea of conscious allocation, that stays the same.
That makes a lot more sense. It's about the intention behind the numbers.
Yeah.
And I guess when you look at actual spending patterns, that's where you really see that intention or lack of it. The data we saw shows the average American often spends, get this, more than 40% of their income just on wants, those discretionary things.
40%, that's a lot. A really significant chunk, often just kind of floating out there without much thought.
Yeah. But then you contrast that with the top 1%. The difference is stark. They spend much less on discretionary stuff.
Much less.
And instead, they consciously, deliberately redirect that money, that vital cash flow. Where does it go? Into assets, things that grow their wealth.
And this simple shift, it sounds simple, but it's profound.
Hmm.
This shift from being mostly a consumer
Buying
to
for.
being primarily an owner, buying assets. That is truly what creates that financial separation, is what leads to long-term wealth accumulation.
So you're not just saving, you're converting spending into productive capital.
Precisely. Instead of buying things that lose value, you buy things that hopefully gain value or produce income. It's not just about what you don't spend, but what you actively do with the money you keep.
Okay, but that shift, consumer to owner, it feels like a big mental leap for a lot of people. What's the main hurdle there, according to the sources? Why is it hard?
Yeah, the material suggests a really common block is, well, the instant gratification cycle we're all sort of swimming in.
Yeah. Buy now, pay later, get it immediately.
Right. Society encourages immediate consumption. The top 1%, they seem to have really cultivated a longer-term view. They delay gratification now for much bigger rewards later. It's like a mental muscle, Needs exercise.
I can definitely see that. Building that patience muscle.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say you've designed your spending. You're aiming to be an owner. The next problem is making sure the money actually stays where you allocated it. Because as our sources highlighted, even a great budget can get silently undermined by these little things we call financial leaks.
The leaks.
Yeah.
They're insidious.
It's almost like your money just finds ways to escape through tiny cracks you don't even notice. We're talking about those small recurring costs that seem totally harmless on their own, right? Like that streaming service you forgot you had.
They'll pay him for it.
Or those little impulse buys at the checkout. Or maybe that daily coffee, the takeout lunch.
Adds up fast.
So fast. Individually, they're nothing. But add them up over a year, they can silently drain thousands. Thousands. Often without you even realizing it. I remember reading about someone who swore they had no unused subscriptions until they actually printed out their bank statement and went line by line.
Yeah. The leaks can be really sneaky.
So it's not just about the big obvious spending. It's about knowing every penny's journey. Our sources were really clear on this. The top 1%, they're like forensic accountants for their own money.
Forensic accountants. I like that.
They monitor cash flow super closely. They track expenses. They review their statements. They look for patterns. They know where every dollar is going, period.
That's exactly right. And it's really important to clarify this, I think. This isn't about, micromanaging yourself into anxiety or spending hours pinching pennies.
Right. It's not about being cheap.
No. It's a critical form of financial control. It gives you the real picture, the truth, about where your money is actually going, not where you think it's going.
That's a key difference. Reality versus assumption.
Totally. And that knowledge is empowering. It lets you make intentional choices based on facts, not just guesses. It's the difference between, say, carrying water in a leaky bucket versus having a properly engineered dam.
That dam analogy really works. It makes it concrete. Okay, so they've plugged the leaks. They know exactly where the money's flowing. What's the next big piece of the puzzle?
Automation.
Automation. Okay.
This came up again and again in the sources as another powerful strategy. You could almost call it a secret weapon. The wealthy, they don't just rely on sheer willpower day after day. That's exhausting, right?
Yeah, willpower runs out, especially by Friday afternoon.
Exactly. So instead, they build robust financial systems.
Systems over willpower. Okay, like what kind of systems?
Well, think about it. Setting things up so every single paycheck gets automatically split the moment it hits your account.
Ah, pay yourself first, automatically.
Yeah, precisely. A certain amount whisks off to a high-yield savings account. Another slice goes directly into retirement accounts, maybe into low-cost index funds. Some people even use those apps, that round up every purchase to the nearest dollar and invest the spare change.
Yeah, the Acorns type apps.
Right. It's all about removing the need for manual action, taking the daily decision-making, and, frankly, the human tendency to procrastinate or forget right out of the equation.
So you make the decision once, set up the system, and then it just happens.
That's the beauty of it. The power of this strategy is huge, precisely because it strips emotion out of the saving and investing process.
No more feeling guilty on payday or trying to summon motivation.
None of that. You're not relying on some fleeting burst of inspiration. You're building discipline by design. It makes building wealth consistent, almost effortless over the long haul, because it just hums along quietly, reliably in the background, no daily effort required.
Which really brings us full circle, doesn't it? Back to that foundational idea that ties all these habits together. The undeniable power of time and repetition.
The long game.
Wealth, as our sources consistently emphasize, it just doesn't usually come from one big score, one lucky stock pick, one massive bonus.
Not usually, no.
It comes from these small, seemingly boring, consistent habits, done over and over and over again, for years, decades even.
Yeah, the material really illustrates this well. Saving that 20% of your income, maybe more, investing it consistently month after month in something simple like low-cost index funds.
Yeah.
That's not going to make you rich next week.
Definitely not headline news.
No, it won't feel dramatic at all. But you do that for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. That, according to the data, is how the 1% actually gets there.
It's not magic, it's just math and patience. And consistency, unwavering consistency.
It really is.
Yeah.
And this is the core of what people call the compound effect.
Compounding, the eighth wonder of the world, supposedly.
Right. It starts incredibly slow. It might even feel totally insignificant at first, like planting a tiny seed. You don't see much happening for a while.
Yeah, you water it, nothing happens, you wait.
But then, as time and that relentless consistency do their work, it starts to compound. It builds on itself. And eventually it becomes this unstoppable force. Each small, steady effort amplifies the results of the previous ones. It leads to exponential growth over time.
Exponential, not linear. That's the key.
That's the key. It's a quiet force, but unbelievably powerful. And it truly is the secret ingredient hidden inside these seemingly boring habits.
Okay, so as we start to wrap up this deep dive, let's just quickly recap those four proven habits. The core actions for budgeting and managing money, like the top 1%.
Let's do it.
Okay, first, track every single dollar. Know where your money is actually going, in and out. No guessing.
Know your numbers. Yep.
Second, use a framework like the 50-30-20 rule or, some variation to give every dollar a specific job before you spend it. Needs, wants, future.
Intentional allocation. Got it.
Third, actively hunt down and eliminate those spending leaks. The small stuff that adds up and sabotages your plan without you realizing it.
Plug of the leaks. Critical.
And fourth, automate your wealth building. Build systems so your saving and investing happen automatically, consistently, without relying purely on your daily discipline or willpower.
Systems over willpower.
Love it.
These four things.
And it's worth repeating, right? These aren't some secret Wall Street tricks or insights only available to the elite.
No.
They are proven habits. They are consistently used by people who quietly, steadily build multi-million-dollar lives over time. And they're accessible to anyone who's willing to actually apply them pretty much regardless of their starting salary.
That really brings us to our final thought, a provocative question maybe for you to mull over.
Okay.
If building wealth isn't primarily about earning millions upon millions, but it's actually more about managing the money you do have better than almost everyone else, then what small, consistent, maybe even downright boring habit could you start implementing today? Right now. That single habit might just be your most powerful, most understated step toward building your own lasting, abundant future.
Something to really think about. Definitely something to think about. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.